And when you look at it in the context of all of the various disruptions that are taking place, most recent one now is the war in Ukraine, in which we're now worried about the increase in petroleum prices.
Mm-hmm.
And, when there's an increase in petroleum in oil prices, that everything increases, including food prices.
Indeed.
And these are the issues that we've been warning our people about to let them know how vulnerable they are. Because if we're going to maintain a situation which we only produce maybe 10 or 20% of our food, and that at least 80 to 90% is imported, then whenever we have these disruptions, be they pandemic, wars, then evidently we will become very vulnerable, and we may find ourselves in the future, if we're not careful, in which the boats from Miami do not sail for maybe a 2 or 3 week period. Just imagine if that happens. I guarantee you, if the boats do not come here for 2 to 3 weeks consecutively, that people will have problems buying enough food to eat. You look at the supermarkets shelves, you go into First Choice or Epicurean, for example, let's say the day just before they get in the import, and you'll see that certain products are missing completely. The shelves are partially empty until when they get in the shipment for that week. So imagine if that happens for a 3 week period because of some disruption, be it a pandemic or some war. And let me tell you, this situation with Ukraine, even though it's happening in Europe right now, it doesn't mean it can't escalate and eventually reach our shores in terms of its impact. And in any case, its impact will reach us based on increasing in oil prices. And between Russia and Ukraine, they supply Germany, Europe, generally a number of European countries with most of their petroleum products. And they also have a number of mineral resources as well, in which they have a significant chunk of the global markets. Those mineral resources are utilized in various products. So the impact of a protracted conflict in Ukraine will have global consequences. But more so, if it escalates, because as you know now, NATO, the United States, and NATO, they're giving support to Ukraine, and with the involvement of the US in particular, and you end up with a direct conflict between the US and Russia. And then, there's any, let's say, nuclear arsenal utilized. I doubt they will. I think they understand they have to protect, their people and to protect humanity, but you never can tell. At one point, the rhetoric was so tense during the Cold War that many people thought that we probably would have had World War III and, nukes would have been utilized. So Ukraine could spark a World War III. So we want to see this issue de-escalated and resolved as soon as possible. Now, in terms of our own national position, we have taken a position, and I'll come back to the issue of food security, but since I'm speaking about Ukraine, I'll just go through.
Yes.
We oppose the wars, period. Any form of military aggression, we totally oppose. And as you know, in the United States, they're getting a little rhetorical, or let's say they were getting a little, they're promoting a lot of muscular rhetoric about, war is potentially on the table. We said to them that we will not support any form of military aggression against Venezuela because we understood what could happen. I mean, it could disrupt, the food supply coming into the country. And with those kind of logistic chaos that a war in this hemisphere will create, again, it could undermine us and we could find ourselves in a situation which we can't feed ourselves. So as far as we're concerned, war should be avoided at all costs. And also we have to recognize, wars and militarism, they promote poverty because, when you look at all the military arsenal that these countries have, they cost collectively trillions of dollars. But then you have people out there living on less than $1 per day. You have people who can't even get enough food to eat. People are suffering from, famine. People are impoverished and they're spending all these millions and billions and trillions of dollars to support their senseless wars. And, I think it was Bertrand Russell who said that war does not determine who is right. It only determines who is left. So whereas, we all lament the loss of life and the displacement of these Ukrainians, and innocent Ukrainians because they didn't cause this war. Many of them are now refugees going to different parts of Europe, and it's so unfortunate. We just hope that this conflict will be resolved quickly. And I want to say here, we are not going to get in any argument as to who is right or wrong. What we do, and on every occasion, we stand on international principles. So when the U.S. and Venezuela had their conflict, I mean, we said to them, look, we stand on the principles of the sovereignty of our states, that, we defend the territorial integrity of states and the principles of non-interference and non-intervention. And we believe that conflict should always be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy. So those are really the bedrock principles as enshrined in the United Nations Charter and the OS as well. And we believe that those principles are important to protect all nations, especially the smaller and weaker ones. But, ultimately, you have a situation in which these large countries, especially those with the nukes and those who have significant economic power, they continue to treat these principles with impunity, to the extent you'd have heard me saying from time to time that for them, might is right. So, we have to be very careful and not to get involved in the rhetoric, but at the same time to stand on those principles that will defend our own interests. These are powerful countries. They, whenever it's convenient for them, they speak about defending democracy. But whenever they believe that their so-called national interest is at stake, then might becomes right. And that is precisely what is happening right now in Russia, in which Putin apparently believes that Ukraine is about to join NATO, obviously at the urgings of the United States and other countries in the West. Putin and his government feels that having NATO and having that type of military presence in the backyard, that is inappropriate, and that is why Putin has decided to go into Ukraine and violate all of the international principles of territorial integrity, sovereignty of states, non-interference and non-intervention. As far as he's concerned, the national security interests of Russia is at stake. And he's going to use his superior military power to literally manage Ukraine, maybe to take it over for that matter. There's some who argue too that it's about rebuilding the Soviet Union by recovering some of those states that left the Soviet Union years ago. What I do know, that the immediate issue is definitely about Ukraine joining NATO. But at the end of the day, as I said, for us, we oppose all wars, and we're just hoping that they could come to some compromise. I don't know if the United States, for example, could give Russian undertaking that they will maybe get a commitment from the Ukrainian government that they will not pursue this initiative to be part of NATO. I mean, just to de-escalate the issue. I mean, I'm not saying they don't have the right to join NATO; they have the sovereign right so to do. But in the context of Russia seeing them as representing a threat to the national security interests of Russia, perhaps that's one of the ways in which they could resolve this issue. But again, we want this issue resolved as soon as possible, because if it is protracted, then you're going to see an increase in petroleum pricing. You're going to see an increase in food prices.